John blew into my life with his incredible force in 1996 when he wanted me to play George Wallace for him. I was reluctant at first, but John would not take no for an answer. And I will be eternally grateful for that. Because of his persistence and his conviction, I gained the courage to go ahead, and it is the most rewarding thing that I have ever done as an actor. It was because of John. I got to watch him and learn from him, and I have never, ever seen a director fight harder to preserve his vision than John. One time, on the set of Wallace, I was sitting in my trailer, and all of a sudden I hear, "Gary! Gary Sinise!" And I opened the door to my trailer, and John was standing in the doorway of his trailer, and he's yelling, "Gary, get over here, I need you." And so I walked into his trailer, and one of our producers, Ethel Wynant, was sitting there, and Nick Lombardo from TNT. We had been shooting for 47 very long days, and the folks at TNT were getting a little nervous and concerned about the budget. And at this point, some of the most critical scenes were still to be done, the most important of which was a scene where, in 1963, Wallace is inaugurated governor of Alabama. And for the final 4 days of shooting, of our shooting schedule, we were going to go up to Sacramento to shoot the scene in front of the Capitol building up there, which would double for the Capitol in Alabama. And I entered John's trailer, and he says to me, "Now, Gary, Nick has just informed me that they are going to pull the plug on us at the end of the week. They are not going to let us go up to Sacramento to shoot the scene where Wallace becomes the governor." The most important scene in the picture, in a movie about the governor of Alabama, we are not going to see him actually become the governor. What do you think about that? Well, it seems to me that everything we've done up to this point, the last 47 days of shooting, are kind of pointless without the scene where the governor becomes the governor. And I kind of feel that everything I've done at this point as an actor on this movie, my entire performance would be rendered senseless. Because I've been thinking the whole time that I was playing a guy who desperately wanted to become the governor of Alabama. So if we're not going to see him become the governor in the movie, then I sort of feel that there would be no point in continuing because the movie has just been killed. There was a pause. Nick from TNT stared. And then John launched. He pleaded and spit and turned fire red. His eyes were popping out of his head. "Nick, you can't do this to us. We have all worked too hard. My God, you may as well just throw Ted Turner's money down the toilet. The movie will not work without this scene. Please come to your senses. We are making what could be a tremendous movie here, but it won't be unless you let us finish what we started." This kind of thing went on for another 20 minutes. And then the next day, John informed me that we were going to Sacramento. Now, I tell you this story because John used to love when I would imitate him. And I know he'd be in hysterics. He is in hysterics right now and smiling. And also because I think it says so much about John's passionate commitment to getting it right. That's who he was. He was a fighter and someone who refused to give in when he knew he was right. He was always looking ahead with energy, with the energy and enthusiasm of a much younger man, a committed artist who was never going to stop growing and learning and kicking ass. I'm a lucky man. I got to work with him 3 times, George Wallace, Reindeer Games, and Path to War. And for the past 7 years, we were very close. I learned so much from him, and I loved him dearly. I owe him a great deal. He supported me through some personal troubles, and he was always there if I needed him. He was a good and loyal friend and a tremendous supporter of my work. John was sometimes pretty gruff on the set, but always underneath, he was a compassionate and caring human being, a smart, funny, unique individual that left a legacy of great work to us all. He cared about the subjects and the stories he chose to put on film, and he loved the actors, designers, and crews that helped him tell those stories. At one point in his life, he went into the darkness, but he came out back into the light, shining brighter than ever. His later work is every bit as strong, if not stronger, than his most successful early work. God bless you, John. I will miss you terribly, but when I think of you, I will always see you on the set, a giant, towering over everyone, and I will hear you saying, "Let's get it quiet in here. Roll the camera." Action.
I met John when he became Sidney Lumet's assistant in directing You Are There, a highly successful weekly dramatic series CBS presented in the mid-1950s. John, I think, was in his early 20s, but from the beginning he displayed the talent of a genius as he worked with skilled actors, many of whom were old enough to be his parents. He was good enough that within a few shows, Sidney gave him the reins to direct his first show, and all of us in the studio applauded lustily the new star who on that Sunday evening was born behind the scenes in the CBS control room. Walter Cronkite.
Generous, enthusiastic, fun, talented, original, exciting. Which of these adjectives do you use to describe John? How about all of them? And all these adjectives were true when we were working together 50 years ago. We were doing 2 live TV shows a week. We didn't know it was impossible. For John, it was simply a chance to learn and enjoy life. Both seemed equally important to him. We didn't see each other much once he moved to California, but when we did, the meeting always had that deep pleasure of seeming to pick up where we had left off, as if no intervening time had passed. We all miss him. Sidney Lumet.
John and I worked in live TV together in New York at the same time. I feel that I'm closer to John than perhaps any other director. John always seemed so strong, confident, and resilient that I'm sure we always thought he would survive death itself. I have lost. Everyone has lost. But he has left us with so much. Norman Jewison. Thank you, John. We were young together and had fun together. I've never forgotten our work on Playhouse 90. Pleasant Journey. Ben Gazzara.
A consummate professional who surely left a significant mark on the motion picture industry. I worked with him several times and learned something from each experience. He will be sorely missed and long remembered. Charlton Heston.
I worked with John twice, All Fall Down and Birdman of Alcatraz with Burt Lancaster. In both cases, it was a great pleasure. In Birdman, he was brought in after they fired the first director. I thought this man's going to have a tough time, but it wasn't tough at all. He was brilliant, handled every situation perfectly. And on All Fall Down, he just made it fun. Carl Malden.
I will always remember John as the greatest director I've ever worked with. He was a man who stood for his visions and ideas, inspired me, and challenged my creativity. He was a profound teacher who opened doors for me. I am proud and fortunate to have worked with him. Elias Simmerl.
there was anyone I would designate as my mentor, it would be John Frankenheimer. I loved that man. John had an innate sense of where to put the camera. His wide-angle, steady-cam masters and even close-ups, which included other characters at the same time, were genius. He would always let the actor's instincts and emotions help him place the camera and tell the story so well. His inspiration and legacy will always be here. Thank you, John Frankenheimer. Love, John Leonetti.
Thank you, John. I feel privileged and proud to have shared a brushstroke on the canvas of your magnificent career. With respect and friendship, Janet Leigh.
I loved his passion and energy, and will always remember him greeting me every morning on Path to War with a handshake and a report on how the morning's tennis had gone. I'll miss his commanding presence, his wonderful stories. He was a wonderful man and had many more years of film left in him. Richard Francis Bruce.
My life changed on July 25, 1994, when I met John, and he offered me the job as costume designer on Andersonville. I was so excited that I walked on air for the rest of the day. He had that effect on people. I was captivated by everything about him, his vision, his eye for detail, his style, and most of all, his loyalty. I think that working on Andersonville in that never-ending Red Sea of Georgia mud was one of the hardest jobs I've ever had, but I would not change it for the world. I miss him dearly. May Ruth.
His enthusiasm, passion, and love of both his work and life set an example to follow. You have to know that somewhere in this universe, he's barking directions at someone right now. Bob Weinstein.
It is so shocking. He was such a man. I loved him. He got me through Path to War like no other director could. He was the best, and is a great loss to us all. Michael Gambon.
Grand Prix was a big film about car racing, and All Fall Down was an intimate tale of a family with a universal need for love. The stories couldn't have been more different. But I was fascinated to see how John brought his personal experience and talent to both films. He was dynamic, enthusiastic, and always caring. He will be missed. Eva Marie Saint.
He was a beautiful man and a beautiful friend. John was a cheerleader for the film business, and he was a cheerleader for the human race. We shall miss him very much. Warren Cowan.
John was not a musician, but music in his films was always an intriguing and important facet for him. In a John Frankenheimer film, from moment to moment, any one of us could make the most important contribution. In my case, he took my music very personally. It's one thing for a director to say, "With your music, I want the audience to cry." It's another when he says, "With your music, I want to cry." He has left his community of gifted, intelligent actors, filmmakers, and musicians the legacy of his vision and respect. We will live on accordingly in his honor and memory. Gary Chang.
After more than 40 years of knowing John, I remain in awe of him. He never let up on quality, discovery, and working with the best in all mediums. And his resiliency, God, what resiliency. At his lowest ebb, when it seemed the work was not happening, he still would not conform, not give in. He remained inventive, original, and always interested, curious, and wildly interesting. He lived life on his terms and thrived. You can't do better than that. I'm grateful we were friends. He was quite unforgettable. Betty Bacall.
For some reason, I always thought that that enormous vital energy that was John to me had to be indestructible. Of all the directors I've worked with, I will always remember him with warmth, not only for his very unusual, sensitive, and lust-filled attention to actors, but also for his generosity as a human being. Stellan Skarsgård.
John was just the best there was, period. I loved his passion, his perfection, his keen attention to detail, his caring and concern with all people he was working with, right down to the extras. In my time working in films, I've never known any director as respected by actors as John. I feel very blessed to have known him and shared his tremendous generosity and the love he had for people. Love always, Frederick Forrest.
Art of any kind has to become a kind of prayer, and creativity has to become worship. I am sure, John, that until the last moment of your physical being, your mind and soul were involved in the creative act. Dear John Frankenheimer, sir, how wonderful and what a joy it was to join you in the creative act during the burning season. With enduring love and esteem, Tomas Milian.
We spent 13 years and 10 movies together, always a challenge. Never less than the best, never a dull moment. What a privilege, sir. We'll miss you, maybe we'll catch you later, wouldn't change a frame. Till then, we'll keep the sound rolling for you. Mike and Carola Lemaire.
Playhouse 90, All Fall Down, Andersonville, George Wallace, Ronin, Path to War. In one's life, there is always someone you love exceptionally. John, you were that person for me. I love you. I'm still having conversations with you. Ethel Wynant. John's courage and the subjects he chose to tell stories about, his phenomenal eye for composition, depth of intelligence, and stark imagery made him one of America's greatest storytellers. But how he just loved the movies. I spent many hours talking to him about stories, characters, actors, easy locations, hard locations. Sitting back listening to him talk shop made him look 10 years younger than me. I think he really understood how profoundly his work influenced my entire generation. That made him proud. I will never stop learning from him. Steven Spielberg.
Thank you, John, for the respect you had for actors and for me in particular. You took the time to share your vision and philosophies with me and listen to mine. You defended and challenged my choices with your camera and made sense and art of them. Most importantly, you were truly and fiercely my friend. It was an honor, a privilege, and a gift to know you. Samuel L. Jackson.
The grief I feel numbs my fingers, dulls my lips, blanks my eyes. It is unacceptable to my heart that his vigor, his exquisite fighting skills are stilled. My memory fragments and exposes pieces of him, intimacies and embraces of camaraderie, an arm around my shoulder, a word to the wise, laughter about all the cars we've owned, still own, that are the same, all the silly things, all the good things, things done and undone in like patterns on our lives. I shall remember him forever. I shall miss him always. And my love and affection for him lasts as I last. Donald Sutherland.
John Frankenheimer, one of the great directors of American cinema. John, how would you like to be remembered?
Larry, I want to be, that's a strange question. How do I want to be remembered? I think I want to be remembered as a guy who did honest films, who did them well, and who I want to be known as a working director, not as some flash in the pan. You know, I want a career that people are going to say, well, look at that. It lasted for however number of years. And I mean, too often you read these things about these wonderful directors, and when they died, their, quote, glory years were so far behind them. I don't want that to happen to me. I want to keep on going, and I want to be remembered as being better at the end than I was at the beginning.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe. Oh, we shall overcome someday. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. Someday, deep in my heart, I do believe. Oh, we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand Oh, my, what a beautiful song. Our song, too. I want every sister and brother up there to sing like they never sang before. For old Satchmo. Let's go.